Hello and welcome to the latest tournament for the NMSS Vectored Armada series. Uh, we are running a relatively small tournament today. It's only going to be 4 entries, so it should be relatively quick, but because there's going to be 4 entries, I'm going to run one extra bonus round at the end of round 2 to really sort out the top 4 definitively. But let's go ahead and start looking at some of those fleets, shall we? So up first we have Amit T3 by Kaboom. This one, as you can see, is pretty stacked. It's got a few of these really large shields in the back. It's worth noting, originally, this was a resubmit of the original design. The original design, instead of using a couple of large shields, used a ton of smaller shields, but it had a performance issue. Whenever it got too close to another ship, it would cause the game to stutter. So I put 2 of them against each other, and when they got close enough, they caused the game to essentially freeze, and I had to hard terminate it, which unfortunately I had to decline the ship, but Kaboom made the necessary changes, got the one with the larger shields in here, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it performs. The second submission we received was from Joyous18, who submitted. It's kind of hard to tell here in the editor since it's just a single ship, but this is a behemoth of a creature called Do Southern Teaser Bases Still Work? Or something like that. It's a reference to Clash of Clans. If you're paying attention in the Discord, you'll see the video that inspired this ship. But it's got a lot of forward-oriented shields and a few forward-oriented guns using sort of a classic trapper-style architecture. We haven't seen too many successful trappers in VA because of some fundamental game changes compared to reassembly, which inspired it. But I'm looking forward to seeing how this big boy performs. Up next, we have Corsola from Laps. This is a really sleek design overall. And Laps went pretty hard on some of these rail cannons and these Havoc shockwaves. The shock cannon, these are a moderately high tier, if I remember right, shock weapon that was recently added. The shock weapons, yeah, that's the highest tier shock weapon. Shock weapons get bonus damage against shields, they can disable components, and they're the only weapon as of this video in this tournament that actually has an area of effect damage archetype, which makes them good at disabling stacked shields, but against spread out armor blocks, obviously they're not going to be able to do a whole lot. It adds a little bit of a rock, paper, scissors thing. Looking forward to seeing how this one performed. Really like the silhouette of it especially. It's nice and clean, but we shall see it shortly, I think. And last but not least, we have a tournament entry from a new participant named Jacques006. Don't believe I've seen him participate in anything ever before, so he might be in the community. He might be someone who saw the announcement on the Steam page. Not entirely sure, but either way, thank you for joining us. I haven't spent a whole lot of time looking at this one. This arrived late last night, shortly before I went to bed, but it has a few shields protecting it, which shields in the past have demonstrated very high resilience against incoming damage. It did bring one of the shock weapons, a few direct weapons, some drones. Overall, a nice balanced loadout, and the struts and, well, the bridges and the thinner structure isn't as big of a deal because he's relying so heavily on shields for protection. And you can see there's also a large number of small point defense weapons scattered around the outside, so I'm feeling like this will have good resilience against strikecraft and against missiles, but we'll see how that plays out. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the next video and start getting these fights going. Alright, so getting into round 1, we have Kaboom against Joyous, and then Laps against Jacques006. Again, for round 1, this depends on the order that the ships were submitted. Every further round will depend on the performance in previous rounds. So let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, and our first match of the day, you can see Ahmed is described as the pinnacle of soul harvesting, while do Southern Teaser bases still work is literally the description from the video, which I forgot and is amazing. So let's go ahead and get into it. As you can see, like I described before, the shields on Ahmed are still pretty dense, but there used to be dozens of shields in this inner cluster. And Ahmed immediately drives inside the arms of Southern Teaser bases and is using a lot of the chain guns, which I like personally because they're burst-oriented weapons, and so they tend to cause long-term damage rather effectively. And they have pretty good uptime still, so their sustained damage isn't bad either. And you can see Ahmed's shields are protecting it from all incoming fire and have so far proven very resilient against the damage that the Southern Teaser bases bring, and Ahmed takes it. And in our second match today, we have Corsola from Laughs, which is originally submitted under the name Oblivion Dynamics, and thus the name here, but I did change it to Labs for my reference. And then against Jock's fleet, and I just realized that all 4 submissions this time were single ships, all bumping up against that 20,000 awesomeness, which I think is what Laps wanted to see. So let's go ahead and get it started. You can see on the right here, Jacques' ship maneuverability is not its strong suit, but it does pack a lot of defense and a lot of long-range weapons. So I don't know that it needs to be fast. Laps is closing the distance very quickly with the opening barrage disabling the frontal shields on both ships, but with Jacques having additional rear shielding, the main chassis is largely undamaged, but the big laser punching through the sides of Laps's ship, and now it is as good as over, and Jacques takes his first round. Nice opening for a first-time competitor. So getting started with round 2, we've got Joyous up against Laps first. Both of them did not have a particularly successful first round. And we've got Kaboom against Jacques in the second match. And whoever the middle 2 placements are will have a third match for them to sort out the pecking order in a more concrete fashion. So let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, so first we have Joyous against Laps. The sheer size of Joyous' ship, I feel, might be a bit of a problem for Laps. I think he was relying pretty heavily on closing the gap pretty quickly and punching through the shields of faster enemies. But we didn't get any of those in this tournament. You can see the AoE effect on the shock weapons did do work against these the shields on the arms. And immediately one of the cores used by Joyous 18 gets cut clean. A good volume of fire coming out of both ships, but so weapons in Vectored Armada will specifically target functional segments outside of, instead of firing directly at the command block. And that's why you'll see some of these shots are straying to the side. And I think that's part of Joyous's plan, was to have a few functional blocks on the outsides in order to divert incoming weapon fire away from the actual important blocks, which are all sort of centrally located at the hub of the ship. Meanwhile, because Corsola, all of its important blocks were toward the middle, essentially every shot went toward the middle and every shot found purchase on something important. And you can see from the blinking core here that Corsola is struggling pretty hard, no shields left, and disconnected with Joyous taking the round. Well fought. And now we have Ahmed versus Jacques. And previously, Ahmed was a very tough cookie to crack, but Jacques is also bringing a bigger weapon than I think any of the other competitors are bringing. I'm not entirely sure how that interaction is going to go. Lots of frontal fire coming out from Ahmed, though, from all of the chain guns that it's bringing to the field. Jacques did manage to punch through those shields, but in the DPS race, Ahmed did manage to take it. A spectacular little slugging match from both of them. And our last match of the day, we have Joyous against Jacques, which They are the middle two contestants with 1 win and 1 loss each. So we're really just settling who's in second and who's in third. These contestants haven't faced each other yet in this encounter. It should be pretty interesting. The large weapon on the back of Jacques' ship is definitely paying for itself, I think. The sheer amount of damage, range, and punch that it's bringing to the table seems to just allow it to saw through everything that it encounters. And both of these ships are fairly slow and do appear to be pretty okay with standing off, but Jacques' ship is pushing forward. The large lasers, you can see every time they fire, it's a problem for whatever happens to be on the receiving end. But Jacques' shields did go down there for a second. He shed some chassis blocks. And with Jacques turning again, that's not ideal. Joyous he concentrated the bulk of his weapons toward the hub here, but you can still see there are quite a few guns out to the sides. And they are enough, it looks like, to pressure the shields, but not entirely enough to soundly break them. However, Joyous also has drone launchers on the back here, and you can see the drones are starting to accrue in number. That could prove to be a problem since the drones want to hide behind the main chassis anyway, allowing the drones to borrow the survivability of their carrier. But it does feel like they may have already reached critical mass, and they're spending a lot of time not firing. That might be something Labs needs to look at. But a pretty good slugging match between the two. I feel like this would have been over a while ago, but for whatever reason, Jacques' ship keeps wanting to turn off-center. I think it might be... I could take guesses. My best guess would be because it lacks reverse thrust, it has to turn in order to reposition itself. And because it's a little light on the thrust in general, turning at all is a bit of an issue for it. But the large cannons here, these rock cannons I think is the name of them, they are slowly but surely pressuring these shields into submission. So one of the other mechanics that was added since the last tournament is that as shields take damage, they build up heat. And the heat dissipates over time, but while they have the heat, the shield recharges slower. So perma-tanking with soft shields is no longer as easy as it used to be. Between the shock weapons and the heat buildup. But as you can still see, shields are very potent defensive measures, with those couple of shields managing to hold on. However, Jacques did take the round, so that will give us our second place. And so I just wanted to take a moment to render all of these ships together. This is Ahmed here at the top, our number 1, Jacques, our number 2, Joyous 18, our number 3, and Laps, unfortunately, coming in at number 4. But this gives you an idea of the different scales of the ship. And, but thank you to all of our entries for joining, and thank you, the viewer, for watching.